Hello, this is Professor Michael Fournet, and this week's lecture is going to focus on how a market works. We're going to look at the mechanical features of a market and how those mechanical features give us outcomes in a marketplace. Now, for this particular lecture, I'm going to focus primarily on mechanical aspects of the market. I've given you a series of handouts. I gave you a handout entitled The Mechanics of Demand Theory. I gave you a handout entitled The Mechanics of Supply Theory. And I also gave you a handout entitled Changes in Market Equilibrium. You will need those handouts ready, available as we go through this lecture. In the handout on Mechanics of Demand Theory, I made a distinction between a change in quantity demanded and a change in demand. And I also gave you a short list of factors or determinants that will lead to a change in demand. We will make use of some of those factors as part of this lecture. Also, I gave you a handout entitled The Mechanics of Supply Theory, and that handout focused on distinction between a change in quantity supply and a change in supply. I also gave you as part of the handout, a small listing of factors that would lead to a change in supply. I will use some of those factors as part of this lecture. And the last handout I gave you some details on different cases in a market that we refer to as changing market equilibrium. So-called demand-induced case, supply-induced case, and also combination case, and the indeterminate cases. And we want to look at examples of each one of those types of cases as well. So as we go through this lecture, have those handouts ready, as I will be referencing some of the contents contained in those handouts. We'll start by taking a look at the very basics of the market model. Look at what I call the free market model, so we can understand its basic workings. A free market model is one that reflects the interaction between consumers on the demand side and sellers on the supply side. It's where consumers and producers interact. The demand curve is downward sloping due to the law of demand, which says that consumers, when faced with a lower price, will buy more. And supply curve is upward sloping, reflecting the fact that when the price goes up, sellers will be willing to produce larger quantities. So you put those two groups together with their conflicting agendas, and you let them kind of work it out in the marketplace. And where the curves intersect, that is known as the point of market equilibrium. It's where at a given price, what we call the equilibrium price, P sub E, the amount consumers buy will equal the amount producers produce. So it's like consumers and producers are shaking hands and they're agreeing to a price and they're agreeing to a specific amount of some product. Now, equilibrium is not where demand equals supply. It is a point. It is a point where at a given price, the quantity demanded equals quantity supply. Now, in marketplaces, sometimes the price in the market will differ from the equilibrium price. So if the price happens to be higher than the equilibrium price, such as at P1, at that higher price, consumers will be discouraged from buying the product. So if the price were P1 on demand curve, consumers would say we want to buy smaller quantities. By the same token, if the price were P1, sellers would say on that curve they would produce more. So when the price is above the equilibrium price, the amount produced by businesses will exceed the amount that consumers are willing to buy, and it creates what we call a surplus. So at a price of say P1, at that price the quantity supplied, which is how much producers would produce, exceeds the quantity demanded, which is how much consumers would be willing to buy. At the other extreme, when the price is below the equilibrium price, such as at P sub 0, consumers are very excited about low prices. They like low prices. And so when the price falls on the demand curve, consumers would buy larger quantities at that price. But by the same token, sellers don't like low prices, so if the price falls all the way to P sub 0, sellers respond by producing a lot less. So in general, whenever the price is below the equilibrium price, like P sub 0 is less than P sub E, the quantity demanded at that price will exceed the quantity supplied. And that mismatch is what we call a shortage. It's simply there's not enough being produced at that price to satisfy the wants of consumers. So what's interesting about a free market, and a free market is one that's not subject to government intervention. In a free market, whenever there's a surplus or there's a shortage, the market goes through a process called self-correction. Essentially, when you have a surplus, overproduction, that puts downward pressure on price, so the price will fall. Like, for example, when stores have sales, it's because they have excess inventory they can't get rid of at the current prices. So they lower the price. As they lower the price, consumers buy more, producers produce less, and eventually the surplus is eliminated. The opposite is true for a shortage. Whenever there's a shortage, there's upward pressure on price, so the price would start rising towards the equilibrium level. As that price goes up, consumers will buy less. The price goes up, producers will produce more, and eventually everything is reconciled back at equilibrium, and the shortage is eliminated. So when you have a free market, if you're not at equilibrium, where the curves are intersecting, you're in a state of either surplus, where the price is above the equilibrium level, or shortage. And a free market will naturally correct itself to get back to the equilibrium point. What I want to look at now are a series of cases, which are referred to as changing market equilibrium. And this is reflected, these cases are denoted in the changing market equilibrium handout that I provided for you. And I want to start with the category of cases known as demand-induced cases. And demand-induced cases are cases where all of the action in the marketplace is occurring on the demand side. So there's a change in demand only in the market, and it's going to influence our definition of equilibrium. Let's take an example. Let's say that in some market, we'll call this market, I call the market good B. So we're in the good B market. So let's say in the good B market that taste for the product goes up. Consumers really like it. So taste goes up. And so when taste increases, that causes an increase in demand. So taste go up, demand goes up. When demand increases, the demand curve will shift to the right. So I've taken the factor, saw how it affects demand, and then reflected graphically the change in demand in the market model. Now when the demand curve shifts to the right, what will happen is our definition of equilibrium will change. That is, we start with demand curve, demand 1, and supply curve, supply. Where they intersect gives us the initial equilibrium price, which I call P sub E1, and the initial equilibrium quantity, which I call Q sub E1. So that's the initial equilibrium. Then we have this change in demand, this increase in demand due to higher taste. Demand curve shifts to the right, so our equilibrium point moves from this original location over to this new location where demand 2 and supply intersect. At the new location, the equilibrium price increases to P sub E2, and the equilibrium quantity increases to Q sub E2. So when in a market, whenever you have an increase in demand, as in this case, the equilibrium price will go up and the equilibrium quantity will go up. Now if I said taste decrease, demand would decrease, demand curve would shift to the left, the equilibrium price would fall, the equilibrium quantity would fall. So you simply need to take those demand determinants reflected in the mechanics of demand theory handout and just see how that when a factor causes an increase, it will make the demand curve shift to the right, price will go up, quantity will go up. If the demand determinant causes a decrease in demand, then the market model demand will shift to the left, the price would fall, and the quantity would fall. The second category of cases are known as supply-induced cases, and they are just the opposite of demand-induced in the sense that all the action here takes place on the supply side. So only the supply curve is shifting in supply-induced cases. For example, one factor that I identified on the mechanics of supply theory handout was technology. And I'm assuming in this case that technology decreases. So in this market, which is I call market C, there is some decrease in technology, right? And so when technology decreases, that will cause supply to decrease. And so if we start with our initial equilibrium position where supply 1 and demand intersect, if we start here, a decrease in supply will mean the supply curve will shift to the left. So it will shift to the left from supply 1 over to supply 2. At this new equilibrium point, I see where supply 2 and demand intersect, I see the equilibrium price is higher relative to the initial one, and I also see that the equilibrium quantity is lower. So when you have a decrease in supply, it's going to make the equilibrium price go up and the equilibrium quantity fall. Alright? So what you do is you take those supply factors, see how they affect supply, and then you reflect the change in supply in the market model. Either shift the curve left or shift it right. If you shift it to the left, as I demonstrated here, the equilibrium price will go up and the equilibrium quantity will go down. Supply induced, only change comes from the supply side. Now the cases I really like are the combination cases, because the combination case, as the name suggests, is where you have an increase in, you have a change in demand coupled with the change in supply, and both occur simultaneously. So in the combination case, let's take a look at an example. Here in this case that I've created, I say the number of buyers in this market, and this market would be the good D market. So in the good D market, we have number of buyers increasing, and we couple that with an increase in resource costs. Alright, so when buyers increase, we know that causes an increase in demand. When resource costs go up from supply theory, we know that causes a decrease in supply. So supply is going to decrease. Alright, so I know the demand curve is going to shift. It's going to increase in demand means it's going to shift to the right. A decrease in supply means supply curve will shift to the left. But in combination case, you have a caveat or a condition, and the condition is designed to help you determine how much one curve shifts relative to the other. So let's say we have the condition here that the increase in demand is less than the decrease in supply. So the increase in demand is less than the decrease in supply. And what that means is that the demand curve is going to shift to the right, reflecting an increase, but supply curve is going to shift more to the left, reflecting a larger decrease. And so by showing that, I start with the initial equilibrium point where supply 1 and demand 1 intersect. I take demand curve, shift it to the right from demand 1 to demand 2. I take supply curve, shift it to the left by a larger amount from supply 1 to supply 2. So my new equilibrium point occurs where the two orange curves intersect. And so compared to my initial equilibrium point, I see that the equilibrium price is higher, and I see that the equilibrium quantity is falling. So in this particular case, the result of more buyers and higher resource costs, with the condition that the decrease in supply is greater than the increase in demand, the effect would be the equilibrium price goes up and the equilibrium quantity would go down. Now with combination cases, what's interesting is all you have to do is change the direction of sign for the condition. For example, I could say the increase in demand is greater than the decrease in supply. Or I can say they're equal. And that gives you a different outcome. For example, let's look at another example of a combination case. In this next example of a combination case, I'm asserting that in this market, which would be the the good E market. So in the good E market, we're making this assertion. We're saying that there are more buyers and there are more sellers. Now, when there are more buyers, as we learned from demand theory, demand is going to increase. When there are more sellers, as you learned from supply theory, supply will increase. I then impose this condition just so that I can have a unique outcome that the increase in demand is going to equal the increase in supply. More buyers cause demand to increase, more sellers cause supply to increase, and I'm assuming the effects are equal. So what I do is I go to the model for good E. I have the initial equilibrium condition where demand 1 and supply 1 intersect, and I take the demand curve and shift it from demand 1 level to demand 2, shift it to the right. I take also supply curve, shift it from supply 1 level over to supply 2. Now, because the effects are said to be equal, that is, because the increase in demand is said to equal the increase in supply, the rightward shift of the demand curve will match the rightward shift of the supply curve. And as a result, the price will stay at the same level. So in this case, based on this scenario, the equilibrium price doesn't change, it stays at P sub E, and the equilibrium quantity in this case will increase from Q sub E1 to Q sub E2 because both curves have simply shifted to the right. As they shift to the right, they're going to pull the quantity in that direction. So combination cases are fun, you just have to kind of be very precise with them in terms of your interpretation of the effects of the factors and also the depiction graphically. The last category of cases are known as indeterminate cases, and they start out a lot like combination cases in the sense that you have a change in demand coupled with a change in supply. The only difference here in the indeterminate cases is you don't have a condition. You don't have a way of knowing how the change in demand compares to the change in supply. Let's look at an example. Let's say we're told in this market, which I've identified as the good F market, we're told that good F is a normal good and that income increases. Okay, so from demand theory, if the good is normal and income goes up, we know that's going to cause an increase in demand. So demand will increase. So the demand curve is going to shift to the right. We're also told that business taxes in this industry are decreasing. As we learned from supply theory, when business taxes decrease, supply goes up. So supply will shift to the right. So from this information, I know there's going to be an increase in demand and an increase in supply. What I don't know is how much demand is increasing relative to supply. Does the increase in demand equal the increase in supply? I don't know that. Does the increase in demand, is it greater than the increase in supply, or is it less than? Those things I don't know. So because I don't know how much one curve is shifting relative to the other, I have to take a very literal interpretation of the results I have. And so if both curves shift to the right, increase in demand and increase in supply, I can be comfortable in saying the quantity will increase. As we saw in the previous case, where both curves shift to the right, the quantity is going to go up. Now the thing I'm uncertain about is what happens to the price in this instance, because if I don't know how much the increase in demand is relative to the increase in supply, and so I can't be sure if the price is going to stay the same, go up, or go down. So in this particular case, we simply say what happens if the price is indeterminate, which is like saying we don't know. But we can be comfortable in saying we know based on the information given that the quantity will increase. So for indeterminate cases, one or two things will occur. Either you will know what happens to the price definitively and not know the effect on quantity, or you will know the quantity definitively and not know, as in this case, the effect on the price. So in indeterminate cases, you have to be careful because that condition of how much the change in demand is relative to the change in supply is not given. And so you have to work with strictly what you have as the results. Okay? Alright. So play with the cases, play with those factors, make sure you can illustrate them graphically, and next thing you know, you'll be an expert at changing market equilibrium, which is the mechanics of markets. Last thing we want to look at for market behavior is what happens when we have governments intervene in markets. You know, government intervention for our purposes will take two forms. Either in terms of the institution of a price floor, which we'll look at first, or something called price ceiling. In the case of a price floor, what happens is some government agency looks at a market and says, if we do nothing and let the market remain free, the resulting equilibrium price would be socially too low. And so steps are taken to build up that equilibrium price to a more socially acceptable level. In other words, a minimum price is imposed in this market. So the lowest price that can be offered in this market is what I'm calling P-min. Now when that price, of course, is set above the equilibrium level, consumers don't like high prices, producers love high prices, so it creates a mismatch. The mismatch that we earlier called surplus. So when price floors are implemented, they result in persistent surpluses, because at a higher price, consumers are being discouraged, whereas producers are being induced to produce more than consumers be willing to buy. Now, so a price floor is when a minimum price is imposed in a market. Examples of price floors would be like the federal minimum wage, when agricultural businesses receive subsidies. Those are examples of price floors where the price is artificially raised above a free market level. Alright, the other example of government intervention is the case of price ceiling. Now price ceiling is just the opposite of a price floor. It's where some government authority looks at a market and says, if we do nothing, the resulting price, P sub E, would be too high. And so steps are taken to artificially reduce their price down to a more socially desirable level, which I'm going to call P max. And so a price ceiling is when a maximum price is imposed in a market, and the objective of this maximum price is to alleviate some concerns for consumers. So you impose a maximum price, and so the consumers get excited about that lower price, they want to buy more, producers get discouraged by the maximum price and they will produce less, and so as a result it creates a shortage in that market. Okay? So the implication of a price ceiling is that it causes shortages to be maintained in the market as a result. Examples of price ceiling would be like rent controls, where there's in high cost areas of the country there are caps placed on some rental units, and also if there are price caps placed on various products to prevent the price from rising higher. Those are examples of price ceilings. Okay, so price floors and price ceilings are two ways in which government agencies can alter outcomes in the market to either make the price artificially lower or to make the price artificially higher. Alright, that concludes for me the mechanical features of a market. If you have questions, please feel free to send me a message. Please study the material, play with it. It's really not that hard. You just have to practice, play with it, and next thing you know, you'll be an expert on how markets work. So until next week, take care.